Watching himself and the sled dog stranded on a drifting ice floe with no way back to shore, the man secures a rope to the ice. He ties the other end around the lead dog's harness. Then he quietly says, "I'm sorry." With all his strength, he throws the dog forward. He is betting that a single dog can pull the entire ice floe. The moment Togo lands, he begins struggling forward. Faced with what seems like an impossible task, Togo charges ahead without the slightest hesitation. The rope stretches tight. The dogs behind him bark in encouragement. He grits his teeth and keeps pulling, completely forgetting that at 12 years old, he is no longer young. After charging forward again and again, the massive ice floe actually begins to move. Seeing this, Seppala quickly unties the rope. Then, with a single command, the dogs, already poised to sprint, burst forward one after another. They successfully leap onto solid ground. After one final burst of speed, Seppala also jumps ashore. Once on land, he throws his arms around Togo. At that moment, he truly has no words to thank his old partner, because 12 years earlier, he had tried more than once to abandon him. When they first met, Togo was only a tiny puppy. He was born weak and undersized. Seppala wanted nothing to do with him. In the freezing Alaskan wilderness, where temperatures dropped below -30 degrees, the little pup could barely survive. How could he possibly contribute to the team? Seppala planned to give him away. Only because his wife insisted did Togo stay. After some time, not only did he survive, but he also became incredibly energetic. His endless energy soon became Seppala's biggest headache. He ran everywhere. He chewed on everything. He refused to follow commands. With no other choice, Seppala locked him inside the kennel. But whenever the puppy saw his master leave for training, he desperately dug holes to escape. Seppala was furious when he found out. He hauled over huge rocks and surrounded the kennel. Sure enough, the other puppies stopped trying to escape, but Togo simply started digging farther away from the fence. Before long, his fluffy little head popped up outside the kennel. Then he caught Seppala's scent and raced after him. It didn't take long before he found the training team. Togo seemed born to lead. The sled dogs in training instinctively followed his commands. But because he had never received any formal training, the entire sled team quickly descended into chaos. Seppala was furious. Finally reaching his limit, he decided to send Togo to a town dozens of kilometers away. Although his wife hated the idea, she could do nothing to change his mind. Before long, they arrived at the home of a wealthy lady. Before leaving, Seppala warned her that the dog was extremely mischievous. Completely charmed by Togo, she said she didn't mind at all. Heartbroken, Seppala's wife had no choice but to leave him behind. The house was beautiful, but Togo hated every second of it. He ran frantically around the room. Desperate to find an escape, he wanted nothing more than to return to Seppala. The lady believed that after being locked up for a few days, he would eventually accept his fate. But she underestimated Togo's determination. After spotting a weak section of the room, he slowly backed up a few steps. By the time she realized something was wrong, Togo had already smashed through the glass and escaped. Not long afterward, Seppala sensed something unusual during training. The moment he looked up, he saw Togo standing above him, proudly looking down. No matter how hard he tried, Seppala couldn't figure out how Togo had found him from dozens of kilometers away. Seeing the blood covering Togo's body, Seppala's heart finally softened. He decided to take him home. He tried to lift Togo onto the sled so he could rest. Instead, the stubborn dog refused to lie down. The next second, he marched straight over and sat in the lead position. To teach him his place, Seppala put him beside the fiercest dog on the team. The vicious dog immediately bared its teeth. Knowing exactly what to do, Togo began licking its fur. Within moments, he had completely won the fierce dog's trust. The sled team set off once again. Along the way, Seppala was astonished to discover that Togo's speed and endurance clearly surpassed the dogs ahead of him. Trying to hide his excitement, he moved Togo one position farther forward. The dog in front had never expected Togo to take its place. Seeing Togo's smaller size, it instinctively backed away in fear. After setting off again, Seppala could barely contain his excitement. He realized Togo handled that position with ease as well, so he moved him forward another spot, then another, and another. By the time the sled team returned home, Seppala's wife looked up and saw Togo standing in the lead position. Every dog behind him was bigger than he was, yet after the entire journey, not one of them challenged him. Togo had earned everyone's respect through his ability. Seeing this, Seppala's wife smiled with relief. Seppala was even more thrilled. He excitedly told his wife that Togo wasn't just another sled dog. He was a born lead dog. It was at that moment that Seppala finally gave him the name Togo. Although Seppala is beginning to grow fond of Togo, he still believes a dog is just a dog. To him, they are nothing more than tools for humans and should never be allowed into a person's bedroom. From then on, Togo officially becomes the lead dog. Even former championship teams pale in comparison to his. He lives up to every expectation, leading the sled team to victory again and again in the town's races. 12 years pass in the blink of an eye. Just when life seems destined to remain peaceful, a diphtheria outbreak suddenly sweeps through the town. More than a dozen children are infected, and 5 have already died. The mayor immediately calls an emergency meeting. The only cure is a serum located over 1,000 kilometers away. If the infected miss the critical treatment window, they have no chance of surviving. To make matters worse, Alaska is being hit by a once-in-a-century blizzard. Air pressure is dropping at an alarming rate. Roads are completely blocked, airplanes cannot fly, and the entire town is shrouded in the shadow of death. With no other options, everyone pins their hopes on the traditional way of transport. All eyes turn to the town's most experienced musher, Seppala, and his lead dog, Togo. The mayor asks how long the round trip will take. Seppala says the issue isn't the time, it's whether they'll make it back alive. He can't bring himself to give an answer. On his way home, Seppala passes the town hospital. Looking at the children he has watched grow up, now fighting for their lives, leaves a heavy weight on his heart. After returning home, he quietly waxes the sled runners. His wife knows he can't bear to stand by, but she begs him not to take Togo. One of the other dogs can lead the team. Togo is already 12 years old, simply too old for such a journey. He could collapse and die on the trail. The thought that these may be their last few hours together breaks her heart. But Seppala tells her that in weather like this, if Togo doesn't go with him, these will be the last few hours of his own life. Before he finishes speaking, someone knocks at the door. It's the mayor, who has come personally late at night. He simply can't find anyone else capable of making the trip. Unable to refuse, Seppala silently accepts the mission. Before they leave, his wife asks Togo to bring his master home safely and to come back safely himself. Togo seems to understand, giving a slight nod. To save time, Seppala sets off before dawn. The townspeople rise early and line the streets to see them off. Their eyes are filled with respect, hope, and trust. Seppala knows this is a race against death. As they approach the mountains, blinding snow and thick fog swallow everything in sight. Facing the unknown storm ahead, he gears up and leads the sled team straight into it, without hesitation. To save time, Seppala decides to cross the mountain. Deep within the towering snow-covered peaks, he can only lead the team uphill, one exhausting step at a time. The blizzard is far more brutal than he imagined. After finally reaching the top, the real challenge begins. He guides the team toward the valley, but the sled gains speed on the descent. Snow lashes his face so fiercely that he can't even open his eyes, let alone see the trail ahead. Luckily, Togo senses the danger just in time and stops before the team plunges off a cliff. The other dogs aren't as quick to react. Carried forward by momentum, they can't stop in time. As the entire team is about to fall into the abyss, Seppala jumps off the sled and drives his ice axe into the ground, hoping to anchor it. The sled is moving far too fast, but at the very last second, the axe bites into the ice. The dogs stop less than a meter from the edge. Even so, they're still in grave danger. Seppala shouts for Togo to pull them back. Togo carefully turns around and charges uphill with all his strength. The rest of the dogs are terrified. They huddle together, too frightened to move. No matter how hard Togo pulls, he can't drag the entire sled back by himself. Fortunately, the other dogs soon regain their composure. One by one, they turn around and begin climbing uphill. With Togo's desperate effort leading the way, they finally haul the sled back to safety. Once they're out of danger, Seppala notices Togo has injured one of his paws. By nightfall, they reach a nearby roadhouse, where a woman cleans and bandages Togo's wound. Before dawn the next morning, they set out again. To save even more time, Seppala decides to cross the frozen strait. Doing so will save an entire day. The sooner he reaches the serum, the greater the children's chance of survival. The price is that he could lose his life at any moment. Racing across the endless frozen sea, Seppala and his sled team become a sharp blade, cutting through the storm toward the boundless darkness. Then, the constant cracking of the ice startles even the experienced Seppala, let alone the dogs. None of them have ever witnessed anything like it. Every one of them is frightened. Even fearless Togo keeps looking back. Realizing this can't continue, Seppala begins encouraging them with his voice. His passionate words slowly restore the dogs' confidence. At the same time, the local newspaper sends a report to the Associated Press. Before long, people across America learn about what's happening in Alaska. Temperatures are nearing minus 50 degrees Celsius. Winds are reaching 80 kilometers per hour. As the blizzard rages, the diphtheria outbreak grows worse. Men and dogs have set out on a 1,000-kilometer relay through deadly conditions. Everyone follows this heroic race against death. But the question on their minds isn't whether Seppala can retrieve the serum in time. It's whether he and his dogs can survive the journey. While the media and onlookers continue debating the mission, Seppala's team has already crossed the strait and entered another equally treacherous mountain range. As Seppala's story spreads across the newspapers, public attention explodes. The mayor decides to organize a sled relay. 14 relay teams are stationed along the route. Each team only needs to cover one section, then pass the serum to the next. The entire plan depends on one thing: Seppala must successfully rendezvous with the relay carrying the serum. But Seppala's wife points out that her husband will almost certainly risk crossing the strait. If he does, he could completely miss the relay team carrying the medicine. Meanwhile, Seppala knows nothing about any of this. After days of non-stop travel, exhaustion and drowsiness are overwhelming him. The team is moving forward almost entirely under Togo's leadership. At that exact moment, they unknowingly pass the relay team. By the time the relay drivers notice, it's already too late. They shout after Seppala again and again, but the howling wind drowns out their voices, and the exhausted Seppala hears nothing. Just when they think all hope is lost, Seppala suddenly emerges from the blizzard once again. It turns out the alert Togo has stopped the team. In the freezing wilderness, the two men finally embrace, and Seppala successfully receives the life-saving serum. To help his master make the fastest possible time, Togo has already pushed himself to complete exhaustion. Many relay teams have already lost their sled dogs to this mission, their faithful companions buried beneath Alaska's snowy mountains. Fearing the same fate for Togo and the team, they urge Seppala to stay and rest. But Seppala refuses. After spending a simple night resting at the roadhouse, Seppala sets out once again. Watching him disappear into the distance, everyone is filled with admiration. But to their surprise, Seppala suddenly turns right and heads straight for the dangerous strait. To buy more time for the children back home, he decides to risk crossing the strait once again. The temperature has plunged below -60 degrees Celsius. The ice beneath them is dozens of centimeters thick, but battered by hurricane-force winds. Stepping onto it is no different from gambling with their lives. Sure enough, before long they find the path ahead completely blocked. Even worse, the compass suddenly stops working for no apparent reason. With only two possible directions left, Seppala has no idea which way to go. Now everything depends on his lead dog, Togo. At the critical moment, Togo suddenly turns and begins chasing the drifting ice. The team presses forward across shattered, fractured ice. Ahead lies an endless field of broken floes. One wrong step, and they could disappear into the cracks. In conditions like these, Togo's judgment determines whether they live or die. He has to be sharp, fearless, and constantly alert. Massive waves tilt the floating ice, and the slick surface makes it almost impossible for the dogs to keep their footing. Seppala looks back and realizes they're almost at the opposite shore. He shouts for the team to charge ahead. Behind them, the drifting ice breaks apart under the pounding waves. The thunderous cracking of the ice never frightens Togo. He bravely leads the team through the maze, racing like the wind across one deadly obstacle after another. Victory is right in front of them. Then Togo suddenly stops. The ice beneath them is still too far from shore. With the finish seemingly only a step away, Seppala decides to risk everything. He grabs Togo and throws him onto solid ground. By sheer determination, Togo pulls the entire ice floe toward shore, but doing so drains the very last of his strength. When they reach the next roadhouse, the owner's wife gently strokes the deeply sleeping Togo, tears streaming down her face. In the local dialect, she quietly says that the dog is dying. Confused, Seppala asks why she's crying. Her husband simply replies that the smoke irritated her eyes. After another brief night's rest, they prepare to head home. Before they leave, the owner suddenly stops Seppala and takes him to the strait they crossed the day before. The floating ice is completely gone. Seeing the open water before him, Seppala can't help but shudder at how close they came to death. Only 32 kilometers remain. Unable to bear watching Togo run any farther, Seppala tries to put him on the sled. But no matter how hard he tries to persuade him, Togo always returns to the lead position. That's where he belongs. That's his honor. Left with no choice, Seppala fastens the harness onto him once more. As they pass through a forest, the weather grows even worse. The blizzard blocks out the sky. Visibility drops to almost nothing. Seppala can barely see a thing. All he can do is tell Togo that everything depends on him now and urge him to reach the next roadhouse. But the snow keeps getting deeper, and the darkness keeps closing in. Eventually, exhaustion overwhelms Seppala. He falls into a deep sleep on the sled, placing both his life and his trust entirely in Togo. No one knows how much time passes. When Seppala finally wakes up, the sled has stopped. The dogs are all lying motionless on the ground. His heart sinks. He rushes over to Togo. By then, Togo has also collapsed from exhaustion. Seppala begs him to hold on just a little longer. They're almost there. If they stop here, they'll all die. But this time, Togo is simply too exhausted. No matter how desperately Seppala pleads, he doesn't even have the strength to open his eyes. Just as Seppala is about to lose hope, a faint light appears behind him. It belongs to the staff from the roadhouse. Only then does Seppala realize that Togo managed to lead the entire team all the way to the doorstep before finally collapsing. The next day, another sled carries the serum toward the town. Reporters who have been waiting to grab the biggest headline swarm the final relay team with their cameras, turning Balto into the hero of the entire relay. Before long, Balto's name spreads across America. A statue is even erected in his honor in New York City's Central Park. What people never know is that Togo and his team are the true heroes of the mission. Thanks to the serum arriving in time, the infected children survive. After several days of rest at the roadhouse, Seppala and his team finally regain their strength. When the blizzard passes, the remaining journey home is short. Rather than asking Togo to pull the sled again, Seppala decides to walk beside him and the rest of the team all the way home. To Seppala, asking Togo to bear even the slightest extra burden would be unbearable, and the old rule that dogs were never allowed into the bedroom is quietly forgotten. By now, Seppala's view of sled dogs has completely changed. He no longer sees them as tools, he sees them as friends. Although Balto's sled team becomes the town's savior, everyone knows who the true hero really is. People begin sending Seppala gifts and heartfelt thanks. Yet Seppala is filled with worry because all he can think about is Togo's condition. One of the little girls whose life is saved by the serum looks at the weak and exhausted Togo with tears in her eyes and asks if he is about to die. Though it is an innocent question, it cuts straight into Seppala's heart. Unable to hold back his emotions, he rushes out the door. His wife comforts him, saying she is just a child and means no harm. But Seppala blames himself, saying he is the one who pushed Togo to the brink. It is clear he is not ready to face losing his old friend. As time passes, life gradually returns to normal. Even with his injuries, Togo stays by Seppala's side every day. But one day, Seppala deliberately keeps his distance because he has to return to work. Togo can no longer run alongside him. As painful as it is, Seppala leaves Togo at home and sets off with a new sled team. Watching Seppala disappear into the distance, Togo falls into silent despair, just like when he was a puppy. Dragging his injured paw, he limps to the front door. To his wife's astonishment, he twists the doorknob open. Just like old times, Togo escapes once again. Then he limps after Seppala without hesitation. Little by little, he seems to forget the pain. His injured leg even appears to recover. Once again, he becomes the fastest lead dog on the trail. Seppala seems to sense Togo's presence. When he turns around, he sees Togo running toward him with the same determination as 12 years ago, never giving up and never leaving his side. Seppala once believed Togo was born to lead a sled team. Now he realizes Togo was born for him. After that day, Seppala retires from sled racing. Togo's incredible will to live helps him pull through once again. After all, even a once-in-a-century blizzard could not stop him. In retirement, Togo takes on a new role of father. Over the next 2 years, he sires many descendants. While America continues celebrating Balto, mushers around the world eagerly seek Togo's bloodline. They are intelligent, resilient, and fearless dogs. More importantly, they inherit an extraordinary bond with humans. Togo passes away on a Thursday in December. Seppala and his wife continue raising sled dogs. Although Togo is gone, Seppala always feels as if he can still see him running across the mountains. Only then does he truly understand that a great dog may not stay with you for your whole life, but it will spend its entire life staying by your side. This film is based on the true events of the 1,925 serum run to Nome. The life-saving serum was located 1,085 kilometers away from Nome. 20 sled teams took part in the relay. 19 teams each covered about 50 kilometers on average. Togo's team completed the most dangerous 425 kilometers. His achievement remained overlooked for 86 years. It was not until Time magazine reported his story in 2011 that Togo was finally recognized as the bravest animal in history.